What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 2 of Cardboard from Mars. I'm Nima, this is Nate, and with us we have our special guest, Greg.
Yeah, today we're going to talk about strategy archetypes, and this is a pretty complex topic, and because Terraforming Mars is such an awesome and deep game, there's a lot of different strategy archetypes. So today we're going to talk about the Jupiter strategy, the Microbe strategy, and the Science Tag strategy, and there will be other episodes where we tackle some of the other ones.
Okay, so let's get right into this. The first strategy we're going to look at is the Jovian or Jupiter strategy. So, guys, what's this strategy about?
Yeah, well, the Jovian strategy is all about taking Jupiter tags and then leveraging those to get points. And the way you would do that is the Jovian cards themselves often have points on them.
Yep.
But in addition, there's 4 key cards for the Jovian strategy that are multiplier cards based on the number of Jupiter tags that you have.
Right, so what's the idea with scoring those tags at the end of the game?
Yeah, so the more Jupiter tags that you have, that you can amass in your play space, when you combine them at the very end with these 4 key cards: IO Mining Industries, Ganymede Colony, and water import from Europa and Terraforming Ganymede. If in the best case scenario you get all the Jovian tags plus those, you can get a total of 66 points. So I think for this strategy to be viable, I think you need to try and shoot for about 20 to 25 points from this card combination.
Yeah, it should be noted that 66 would be like the god hand.
Yeah, if
right?
you got
That would be the perfect, yeah.
You'll never be able to get that. But the way that we came up with that number is that there are 12 Jupiter tags, and then there's a corporation, Saturn Systems, which provides a 13th tag. And in addition to that, if you add all the multipliers and those tags and the points on the cards, that's how you get to 66.
Right, so a lot of these cards, they're very much geared towards building engines. They have a lot of points on them, like you guys said. And then, yeah, it's all about getting those tags at the end and getting the multipliers.
Yeah. So a key thing that comes up with the Jupiter strategy is that you want to play these multiplier cards, but the question is when do you play them?
Yeah.
Right, so if you play them too early, people are going to know that you're in the Jovian strategy, and they're going to start hacking your cards, right? Yeah. And you're never going to be able to score the points you need. So, yeah, when do you guys play these cards?
I tend to sandbag many of these point multiplier cards towards the end, and I think something that helps me with kind of moving in that strategy vein with playing Jupiter strategy is if you have one of these multiplier cards early on, because you know the second you start playing this, your opponents, if they're seasoned players, are going to start hate drafting.
Totally.
Yeah, and it gets tricky because some of the cards, the multiplier cards, are very powerful. Right. So, for example, IO Mining Industries, I mean, there's a major benefit to playing that early because you get a boost to your titanium production.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they're really tempting to play early, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much benefit to that, but you're really cluing in your opponents into what you're
going to. Yeah.
So it's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually, what I do with that, honestly, is if there's one of the multipliers that I really want to play early, I will often just play it early, but then I refrain from playing other Jupiter tags in an attempt to sort of pretend like I'm not that interested in playing the Jupiter tag strategy.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, at the end of the game, boom, 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 like
at the
over
very
and
end.
over, yeah.
Which is what we tend to do in ours, yeah.
I mean, it should be the reason that hacking these Jupiter tags is such a powerful strategy is there's only 12 of them.
Right.
I mean, so if you take, let's say at the end of the game, you have 2 Jupiter multiplier tags or cards, and you have 5 total Jupiter tags. That's 10 points. That's pretty good. But you can see how the points really scale with the number of tags, and there aren't that many.
Yeah. But that's not even taking into account the inherent point value that's attached already to that card, which does add a lot of power to this type of strategy.
So how do you guys decide to get into the Jupiter strategy? Like, say, it's the beginning of the game, you draw your corporation, and you have your 10 cards. How are you deciding, like, okay, this is going to be a major...
Yeah. I think the number one thing for me is if I get one of the multiplier cards, that really gets my brain thinking, okay, maybe I should do this. Because those are, as you said, those are the really hard ones to get. There's only 3 of them.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you can get one of them, at the least, that's a good way. That's a good place to start. Because I've played this game lots of times and never seen a single one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. I think I agree absolutely with that strategy. I think the other thing that helps push me in that direction also comes with the corporations. I think Credit Core kind of naturally lends to that because many of the Jupiter tag cards tend to be expensive.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
anything you can get to not only build your titanium production, but also to get cash back, I think it helps with cheapening this strategy, making it a more long-term viable strategy, or at least one that you can combine with maybe another secondary strategy.
Right, that's a good point, and that kind of leads into, what are the good pairings for this strategy, right? Like, what other kinds of strategies work with the Jovian strategy? Now, I think the biggest and most obvious one is space and titanium, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these Jovian tags, I think possibly even all of them, are spaced cards, right? So as you guys know, space cards are good with titanium. It lets you make them cheaper. So if you can get a good titanium engine, I think that's a really good pairing with the Jovian strategy.
Agreed.
Totally agree with that. Yeah, and you're also not giving away too much in the early game if you start developing your titanium production.
Right.
It's not a signal to everybody else that you're going into Jupiter strategy,
right,
and so
it's good.
They naturally complement each other, and you can still hold on to those cards at the Jupiter cards until the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another really important strategy archetype that you can pair this with is the science tag strategy. And the science tags are really useful because that strategy helps you draw cards.
Right. Yeah.
And because there are only 12 Jupiter tags in the whole set, and there's something like 220 something cards, having a way to cycle through that deck allows you a much greater chance to get those tags.
Right. Totally.
Yep. So, let's talk about, I don't know, it's a couple of specific cards maybe. I think the one that bears the most discussion is Terraforming Ganymede.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with that card?
Yeah, that's an interesting card because unlike the other Jupiter multiplier cards, this one gives you a one-time effect. You play it and you boost your terraforming rating by the number of Jovian tags that you have.
Right.
And so there's a fundamental tension with this card because you want to play it late to get the most points out of it. But if you play it earlier, it's going to boost your economy and give you that benefit throughout the course of the game. So where do you guys come down on that one?
Yeah, it tends to be, for me when I've played, I tend to combine a strong titanium economy and we'll play, alternative ME producing cards. So for me, I tend to like playing Terraforming Ganymede later when you've dropped at least a couple of these Jupiter tags. So you can maximize it. You can quickly become a terraforming rating like Dark Horse and leapfrog from hopefully being last or second to last because you've taken that hit early on and move yourself up hopefully closer towards the leaders.
Right. So yeah, that's totally valid, and I would normally agree with that. I think the other way to go with that is if the altered argument I would say is if you play that early, well now you get the benefits of the extra money, right?
True.
You're increasing your TR, which is more money, and as we said earlier, this is an expensive strategy.
Yeah.
So the money can help early on, right?
True.
Yeah, and another nuance with that card is that let's say that you don't have a lot of other Jupiter multiplier cards on the board. You can play the Terraforming Ganymede card, and because it's a one-time effect, other people may not hack those other Jupiter tags from you if you only have, say, 3 or 4 Jupiter tags out, but no multipliers.
Yeah, I think the one challenge though with that, I'm like playing it early on. As you said, it only gives you early on in the game, you only have maybe 1, 2, or 3 Jupiter tags at most. So that increases your ME rating only by that. Well, I guess your TR rating by that little bit. And so they're hopefully in the game a lot more cheaper and hopefully easier ways of raising your ME so that you can hopefully maximize on this later on. So
that's true, but let's say on turn 3 you raise your terraforming rating by 4 and the game goes 10 generations. Right. I mean, you've generated a lot of cash out of that.
Right. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably a good card to play at several points in the game. In any case.
How do you guys think of this strategy power wise? Do you think this is a good strategy?
I do. Yeah, I think this is a really one of the stronger ones. I've seen this win games multiple times.
Yeah.
Especially if you're the only one playing it, it's like a god tier strategy.
Yeah.
I think that you can score so many points off of it.
Yeah, and I think that underscores number one the importance of defending against this if you're not in it.
Yeah.
And so often you have to take those Jupiter tags just to defend it. And if you're particularly if you're playing with good players that know how to disguise this, you can just never assume that somebody isn't going into the strategy.
Right.
But also the rewards for getting into this and succeeding are extremely high.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So hopefully you guys know how to do this now, right? You're going to hide this.
Good luck with the Jupiter strategy. Okay, for the second strategy archetype, we're going to talk about microbes. And what I mean by that is the group of cards that have microbe tags on them and how you can combine those cards to generate points in various ways.
Right. So there's 3 types of microbe cards. There's ones that generate microbes. There's ones that increase terraforming ratings based off those microbes. And then there's ones that will score you points based off of how many microbes there are.
Yeah, and I think one thing just to mention right off the bat is that there aren't actually that many microbe cards.
Nope.
And for people like us that tend to be engine builders, you see these microbe cards. There are certain engine cards in there, and you get really excited, like, oh, I'm gonna build a microbe strategy. It's really not that well supported.
Right. So, like, when a game starts, how do you decide to get into this strategy? Like, what do you need to see?
I think for me, I actually tend to look at probably what you've broken down, those 3 different categories. And I think the best one out of those 3 happens to be the ones that generate Terraform rating points, because, again, they generate points towards your final end game. And they're self-sustaining. You could use the microbes that it can self-generate to build those points, or if you happen to come across some of the microbe generating ones, they can help enhance you to get more terraforming points early on.
They are self-sustaining, but they're super slow. So like if you take a card like Regolith Eaters, for example, which either makes a microbe as an action or it could spend 2 microbes to raise the oxygen level, you're only going to get that benefit every 3 generations, right? It takes 2 generations to get enough microbes on it, and then a third to raise the oxygen. That's super slow. I mean, unless you have that in your opening hand, you can only expect to get it once or twice, maybe.
And that's kind of what I was gonna say too. Is like, you need to get this real early, or else it's not gonna score much for you. For that exact reason, it's just super slow.
So, what do you guys think about cards like tardigrades and ants? Again,
I think that these are pretty weak. So tardigrades gives you a 1 to 4, so 1 point for every 4 microbes, and the other one is 1 every 3. So they're not, again, they just take multiple generations to get going, and the only way I see this being viable is if you have one of the 2 microbe producing cards. That's extreme cold fungus or symbiotic fungus. These cards are just absolutely essential to a microbe strategy.
Yeah, don't even bother with this unless you have those, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what, like, we rarely ever do this, right? So why is that the case? Is it we just can't get the engine going, or what?
I mean, there's in my mind, the way that I get into this strategy is if I have one of the microbe producing cards in my opening hand, along with one of the terraforming generating cards.
Right.
And so you're really talking about like a 2-card combo out of like 200 and something cards in the whole set. It's just unlikely that you're going to get that in the opening 10 cards.
I see it more just as purely as a support strategy, and I think for me it boils down really to those 3 terraform generating cards. And again, I agree with you, slow, and it does take 3, 4 turns before you can actually get something on it. But it does help to get you probably maybe 3, maybe 4 points towards the end of the game, maybe. But at the end, it's a support strategy, I think, and I think you really have to base your game on something a little more viable.
I would push back a little and say if you were able to get this strategy really singing, I think you could get probably on the order of like 10 points. If you're considering the terraforming rating that comes along with some of those cards. Like, yes, the like tardigrades, it's really slow, and it'll only get you a certain amount of points. So yeah, it's really difficult to get the points on this, but if you get what you need, I think it's better than 3 or 4 points, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, if you get extreme cold fungus and a terraforming generator, in your early in the game, you could score 8 points right off of that combo right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple things in defense of microbes is that one, unlike plant strategy, which we'll discuss later, there aren't that many ways to remove microbes from people's cards. Ants is an exception, and that can be very powerful. But unlike the plants, which are just devastated by comets and asteroids, there aren't that many ways to remove microbes, which gives you some protection. And also, because people don't usually go into these strategies, and these cards are generally considered fairly weak, you will get past these in the draft.
Very true.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of agree with you, Greg, that basically I view this as like supplementary points, and if you get these cards passed to you in the first 1 to 4 generations, I'll take them.
It's worth the extra kind of couple points here and there. But I think certain cards like Advanced Ecosystem, which by itself at 11 points at 11 cost and 3 points is a fairly cheap high pointage card that by itself is actually, I think, worth mentioning.
So yeah, what kind of strats do you guys like to play this with? I would say probably the first and foremost strategy that this goes with is plants, right?
Agreed.
There are cards in this strategy that just flat out give you plants. There's ones that work with plant tags. And so yeah, what do you guys think?
Totally agree with that. I mean, I think combining this with plants is the natural home, because a lot of the sort of synergy cards are as Greg, you were describing, the advanced ecosystems, for example, they just reward you for having plants and microbes together. And also, those are cards that nobody else is going to want. So you actually do have a pretty good chance of getting those cards passed to you.
Yeah. Question is, can you get them early enough?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the linchpin with this strategy. It's all about getting this stuff early.
Yeah. Any other comments on microbes?
I think this is something that we'll probably have to come back and readdress probably in a couple more episodes once we move on to the Venus Next expansion, and I think they try and address some of the weaknesses of the microbe strategy, and I think I think this will be worthwhile kind of talking again. Yeah,
I think I could probably speak for you guys when I say microbes just kind of sucks, right?
They do. They kind of suck.
It just kind of sucks. It's not that fun, and it's difficult to get.
Yeah, and I honestly, and I also have to just admit, if I see somebody really building a microbe strategy, I usually just think that person can't win. I'm just I don't have to worry about that person, and I'm just gonna ignore that person in the draft and
right. And I think it's important to say that yeah, you can score points on this, but it's nothing compared to Jovian Strategy, for example.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So we should try and combine a microbe Jovian strategy.
Yeah, sure.
Totally throw people off. Totally throw people off.
Good luck hunting microbes.
So in this next third section, we're going to be talking about the science archetype. So Nima, what is the science archetype?
Yeah, so when we say science archetype, we're referring to any cards with the science tag on them. Now, the point with the science archetype is to build a large amount of science tags, which will allow you to get better and better abilities as the game goes along. And one of the major things it does for you is get you the science award, which, as you guys know, at the end of the game is worth a lot of points, and you should always be shooting for one of them. So what else is science really good for?
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, the science strategy is all about incremental advantage. So it doesn't score you points in a linear way like the Jupiter strategy or the microbe strategy, but it just gives you a bunch of sort of random benefits. You mentioned the science award, and then there's just points on cards. There don't tend to be a lot of points on the science cards. Another sub-theme is energy production. So a lot of the science cards will grant you energy production, which then can be used in other different ways.
Right, and a lot of energy too.
Yeah.
So when you start building up a bunch of science tags, the energy you can get from this is huge.
Right.
Which, if you're pairing it with some of the other energy cards that allow you to terraform, it is a very strong strategy.
True.
You'll be getting at least one terraforming every single turn. At least.
At least. Yeah, and another card to mention is Physics Complex, which it does take a lot of energy to power that, but it gives you 2 points for every research resource or science resource on the card. That could just generate ton of points.
Yeah. In the medium end game scenario, it can be extremely changing.
Yeah, and then the other thing with energy is that a lot of the undercosted city placement cards require a reduction in your energy level. And so if you have a science strategy in the beginning, as you get towards the late game, when you want to start putting city tiles down, this can give you a way to get those at an undercosted rate too.
True.
Absolutely.
With energy itself, it has the ability to be converted into heat every turn. So if you build up a fast energy, you have flexibility, especially if you start comparing yourself up with a heat-based strategy. You could conceivably chain this together and hopefully outcompete your opponents in the heat game as well.
Yeah, that's true. If you don't get one of the terraforming cards that takes energy, at least you have that.
True.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to how flexible this strategy is.
Right.
And we talked about this with some of the other strategies where it's extremely dependent on which cards that you get. With the science strategy, it's not that dependent on other cards. Like, you're going to find outlets for energy and for some of these other things that you generate with science tags. You'll find them.
Yeah, totally. So the next thing that science is really good at is card draw, right?
Absolutely.
So this is one of the god tier abilities of science, right? If you start getting into cards like AI Central, it's truly one of the best cards in the game that allows you to just draw 2 cards. Period.
There's no better feeling when I'm playing against you guys than on turn 2 to drop down AI Central and just be like.
No, anytime one.
I think any of us plays it, it's an automatic leg up. At a cost of 21 and a victory point and 2 card draw, that's hard to beat.
It just feels so good. I mean, the thing about card draw in this game is that, number one, as we talked about in episode 1, drawing cards is worth cash, right? Because in general, it costs you 3 credits to keep a card, but if you have natural card draw, it's just free.
Yeah.
And you can sell those if they're not good.
Yeah.
And it gives you a way to keep control over the turn sequence in a round. I mean, there's just so many benefits from having cards.
Yeah, you guys know that there's been a couple games, right, where in particular you and I, when the last turn, we just get that lucky card draw, and it just wins the game.
I know, it's so annoying.
It's like the most satisfying / annoying thing in the game.
I mean, I think in card games in general, people complain about top decks.
Yeah.
But the reality is that this is what science gives you. It gives you good top decks, right? And so you can't really complain if somebody's drawn 12 cards off AI Central that they hit a good card.
Right.
That was their strategy. They had a sweet strategy. They drew a bunch of cards, and of course they're going to get one that's good for them. So I actually think you can complain about top decks, but if you set up your engine to draw a lot of cards, kudos to you.
I agree.
And I think I think that this card drawing strategy really pairs very well with certain archetypes. I think the obvious one here is the Jupiter strategy, which we mentioned before. Being able to dig down into that deck and hopefully pull out those Jupiter tags, it's a lot better. It's a lot better in the grand scheme of things rather than having to worry about your opponents passing them to you. But I think the other thing too is, as we've kind of pointed out before, each card costs 3 if you want to buy it. This is a simple strategy where you can actually get cards cheaper. Even if you don't need them, then you can always use an action to sell it off. So it's a way of making money. It's a way of getting cards cheaper. So it's a really, I think, excellent all.
That's a great point, because you don't think about card draw as being an economy, but it really is, right? Like, if you drew 10 cards over the course of the game with AI Central, that's 30 credits. So, I mean, yeah, not all of them are going to be super useful, but you're going to get some useful ones. It's a way of sort of incidentally improving your economy.
Yeah. But I don't think we should just focus solely on AI Central. I know that this is a god card, but there are a lot of other cards in that I think for new players as well as for more seasoned players, you can definitely tell a lot of these draw cards do chain off of other science tags that with a low cost. Paying 2 to be able to draw cards, those are still extremely excellent and cheaper ways to actually try and get ahead of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of good card draw in science. AI Central just happens to be the best one.
Yeah.
So, the next thing that science does for you is reduces the cost of cards. There's a few cards in this archetype that make every card cheaper, or maybe it makes space cards cheaper. And if you get these down early enough, boy, you're going to save a lot of money, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And like another twist on that is that not only are there specific cards that reduce the cost of other cards in the science strategy, but then there are a lot of cards which require science tags in order to even play them.
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of those are super undercosted for what they provide you.
Yeah, that's the idea with science, right? Is you just keep building the tags, and then you get really excellent cards out of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you guys consider this to be, like, how do you consider this to be in terms of your overall strategy? Is it like a main focus for you going into games, or is it a supplement? Do you sort of side into it, or do you seek it out?
I think for me this becomes a very strong support strategy. I think in terms of the individual points on the cards, they're definitely not as high as some of the Jupiter strategies, for example, or some of the mining ones where or space ones where you're getting 3 points, 2 points. You know, most of the science tag cards, they actually have an additional 1 point, maybe 2 points. You know, there's a couple of those rare ones that actually give you that 3-point benefit. So I think from an individual card standpoint, you know, you get points, but I think it's much more of a support strategy based on all the things we've just discussed. So I think, and I think from that standpoint, if you're going to build a mining strategy versus a space strategy, science actually just has so much flexibility that it helps build into all of those. So I think it's more, for me, support game strategy.
Well, yes, it is a support strategy, but like, how do you decide to get into it? You know, like what is this something you're really going for?
I mean, I have to confess that, like, basically, I view this as a fundamental part of almost every engine that I build. I usually go into a game thinking I'm going to go after science. You know, if the cards just don't come to me at all in the beginning, then fine, I can move off it. And there are some archetypes that don't require science. And we may have a little bit of a disagreement about that, but for example, I don't use science a lot if I'm going for a ground game strategy, but almost for anything else, I'm going to force it.
Yeah, because for the card draw, I'm like, for me, I see it as an excellent means of card draw and then energy production. Yeah,
like I guess a lot of the games I haven't gone for this, and I think it's been to my detriment.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you know, getting the amount of tags you need to really get this excellent is daunting. It's not easy to amass all of them. It's not. It's by no means really difficult, but it's a little daunting.
Yeah, and I think that when you watch newer players play this game, they often underestimate how good the incremental advantage is that you get from science tags. So. And it's sort of a feedback mechanism there, because it snowballs, where basically if a newer player isn't going for this and just sends all the good science tags to somebody who kind of understands, then all of a sudden that person's just getting enormous advantages in the mid game. And so if you don't, it just takes being burned by that a few times to just realize the potential in it.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, what are there any like downfalls to this?
I don't really think there are any major pitfalls, honestly. I mean, I guess if you go for this in a big way and then you don't get the award at the end, like kind of somebody like plays a few extra science, okay, fine. But it's not like Jupiter strategy where you've spent several hundred credits trying to get into this and then it just fizzles. Like, that just doesn't happen with science.
Yeah, you're gonna get something out of it.
You're gonna get something.
Well, do you think that you have to be an all-in, or can you? Or do you guys think that you can actually kind of, I don't want to say half-ass it, but do you think you can actually half-ass this strategy and just maybe take some selective science and then kind of ignore it?
I think you're not going to get...
viable?
I mean, it's viable, but I don't think you're going to get the full benefit, right? The really good cards, you need 4, 5, 6 tags to get them. So I would probably say no. Like if I was going to go into this, like, you go into it.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, Greg, and like I think that there are specific cards that have science tags on them that will let you draw some cards, and if you just get those in isolation, they can provide a little bit of a benefit,
a bonus, yeah.
And I do that frequently, even if I'm not full in on the science strategy. But I totally agree with Nima that, like, to unlock the true potential, you need 4 or 5 science tags, and you don't really get that unless you specifically seek it out. I will say that just to mention one specific card, I think Research is completely underrated. Research is unbelievably powerful. It has 2 science tags on it. It lets you draw 2 cards. It has a point on it, and it only costs 11. And I think that this is sort of emblematic of the science strategy in general, is that the first time I played, I just passed that card. I was like, well, I don't have time for that. I'm going to work on these other engine building things. But that card, it's just all value. That card, every part of that card is value. And, you know, I mean...
It's easy to pass it off as like a boring card or one just like not a very good card, because you look at it, it's like, okay, 2 cards, 11 cost, what?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's really about the long term, right? Because as we've said over and over again, it's about building up those tags. 2 tags on 1 card is huge.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
True.
Particularly if you're playing Inventrix. If you have Inventrix and then you play Research, you're already at 3 science tags, which is a cutoff for a lot of the undercosted cards.
Yeah. Plus, you know, again, as we'd said, it's, you know, cards. Each card costs 3. Being able to draw 2, that's you've saved 6. And again, 1 point, 1 victory point.
Right.
I'm like, what do you have to play in order to get 1 victory point? That's, you know, drop an ocean, play a forest. You know, all those things are highly expensive, but this just gets you 1 additional point.
Sure.
And at 6 cost.
Right. Let's talk about what you would pair this with. So we already talked about this a little bit. It goes great with Jupiter Strategy and things like that. Nima, you and I may have a little bit of a disagreement about where it doesn't go. Right. And from my standpoint, I would say I don't waste my time with science if I'm going for a ground game. Right. You know.
So mostly I actually agree with you, but the one way it's really good for ground game, I think, is the energy. So like getting all that energy is really good for putting down cities, right?
Yeah.
So almost every city card that you get will require you to reduce your energy production, right? So that is why science is really good for that. In general, though, I wouldn't pair that with the ground game strategy. I agree with that, but it's not completely bad for it.
Yeah. That might be more of a late game kind of strategy, as you are, you know, once you've built up much of your science, you've used your energy for what it needs to be used for. And at that point, the game is now converted maybe to this late ground game where I need to drop cities and I need to play things. Now I can just burn through a lot of my energy production.
And I think you're not going to have a choice. It has to be late game because a lot of those big energy cards are late game cards.
Yeah.
And realistically, you're not going to get a lot of ground points with this strategy. You're just not. It's going to be 5 to 10 probably.
Yeah.
If that. But yeah, I think you're much better served just trying to use that energy and converting it into direct terraforming or something else other than trying to put cities down.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Science is amazing, and you should seek it out. If you haven't tried that strategy, sometimes it helps when you're exploring a new strategy to just take it to sort of extremes and just grab every science card and see what happens. Yeah. And you'd be surprised, it's better than you think.
Way.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next episodes, and we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.